The courthouse smelled like coffee and nerves that morning. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a cold kind of brightness that made even truth look tired. Captain Denise Walker adjusted the cuffs of her uniform jacket, polished so sharp it could slice through tension. Her boots clicked once on the marble floor. Every sound in that room carried. She wasn't there to arrest anyone or take orders. She was there to testify, as a soldier, as a law enforcer, and as a black woman in a place where all three titles seemed to bother somebody. On the far side of the courtroom, Sergeant Cole Hartman leaned back in his chair like he owned the air. He had that grin, the kind that never reached the eyes. People like him didn't have to shout to be loud. They just filled the silence with arrogance. Denise caught him staring. He tilted his chin up in that way men do when they're testing boundaries. She looked back. No emotion, just professionalism. That was enough to make him smirk wider, as if discipline offended him. The judge shuffled papers, the clerk mumbled something official, and the day began. "Captain Walker," the judge said, "you may proceed." Her voice, when it came, was even and steady. She laid out facts, like evidence on a table. What she saw, what she reported, what protocol demanded. No heat, no personal sting. She was trained that way. But Hartman couldn't stand it. Every time she spoke, he muttered just loud enough for the jury to catch pieces. "Here we go again. Always the victim, huh?" The whispers had weight, not the words themselves, but the permission they carried. The room grew tight. The sound of paper turning, pens clicking, feet shifting. Denise kept her eyes on the judge, ignoring him. But ignoring racism is like ignoring smoke. Eventually, it fills your lungs. "Sergeant Hartman," the judge said once, tone clipped, "you'll remain silent until your turn." Hartman raised his hands, mock innocent. "Just reacting, Your Honor." He said Your Honor like a joke, not a title. The crowd snickered, a few nervous laughs, a few agreeing nods. Denise didn't flinch, but inside her stomach knotted. She'd faced armed men, riot lines, roadside patrols, and still nothing stung like being belittled in uniform by someone who swore the same oath. She tried to continue, voice steady but quieter now. "And at that point," she said, "the evidence was secured under standard." Cole cut in again, louder this time, pretending to clear his throat. "Must have been some evidence. Whole departments talking about it. Guess we all know who gets away with what now." The courtroom gasped, a low wave of discomfort. The judge's gavel hit twice. "Sergeant, that's enough." Cole stood halfway, hands on the table, fake smiling. "What? I'm just saying what everyone's thinking." And that was it. The air changed. You could feel it, that thin line between arrogance and consequence, trembling. Denise didn't say a word. She didn't move. But something about her stillness, the way she looked at him, not angry, just done, made the laughter die. Even the people who'd been amused a minute ago sank in their seats. Her calm was scarier than rage. The judge called for order again, but no one heard. All eyes were on her, the soldier standing still in a room built to break composure. And when she finally spoke, it was almost a whisper. But every syllable hit harder than a shout. "Sergeant, you just showed them everything I didn't have to prove." Silence. No gavel this time. No laughter. Just the sound of his pride collapsing into the echo of her words. The courtroom had that heavy stillness people confuse with respect. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed too loud. But beneath it, tension crawled like static. You could feel it on your skin. Captain Denise Walker stood where the light from the tall windows cut across her shoulders, a stripe of gold against military gray. Her uniform still perfect, spine straight, every inch of her trained composure intact. She wasn't about to let some loudmouth strip that from her. Sergeant Cole Hartman had leaned back again, one boot crossed over his knee, playing with the edge of his badge like it was a toy. He looked around the courtroom, eyes catching on the jury, the cameras, then back to her. That smirk again, half amusement, half challenge. "Captain Walker," the judge said, "please continue." She nodded once and kept going, voice even. "As previously stated, I arrived on scene at 1900 hours. The suspect was already restrained." Hartman snorted, loud, deliberate. Denise stopped mid-sentence. The sound bounced off the marble walls, sharp as a slap. "Problem, Sergeant?" the judge asked. Cole shrugged. "Guess I just find it funny how stories change depending on who's telling them." "Enough," the judge snapped. But Cole wasn't talking to the judge anymore. He was looking at her, like the courtroom was gone and it was just him trying to break her again. "Some of us actually earn our ranks, Captain." That one landed. Even the air conditioner seemed to stop. Denise didn't look away. "Some of us have to," she said quietly. A ripple went through the gallery. Not laughter, not gasps, just that low hum people make when they realize the temperature in the room just shifted. Cole's jaw flexed. He wasn't expecting that. He stood, ignoring the judge's order to stay seated. "You think the uniform makes you untouchable? You think anyone here buys that act?" Denise kept her voice level. "I don't act, Sergeant. I serve." The judge's gavel hit. "Sit down, both of you." But the noise was already growing. Reporters scribbling, cameras flashing, whispers rising from the benches. Cole took a step closer. Not touching, not even reaching, just invading space. "Funny," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I've arrested people for less attitude." That was it, the line. Not a word about race, not directly, but every soul in that room heard the meaning behind it. Every person who'd ever been disrespected for the color of their skin recognized the undertone. Denise's expression didn't change, but her silence did something to the room. It drew focus, made everyone notice the difference between authority and abuse. The judge called another recess. Denise turned without a word, stepping down from the stand, boots clicking in slow, deliberate rhythm. The sound of a soldier walking away from provocation. Out in the hallway, the chatter erupted. Phones buzzing, reporters whispering. Even court clerks, who should have been working, lingered near doorways. Denise paused by the marble columns, breathing through the pressure in her chest. She wasn't angry, not the wild kind. It was that deeper kind of anger, the kind that burns clean, that waits. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small silver coin, her service challenge coin. Flipped it once, caught it in her palm. A reminder. Discipline is power. Inside, the courtroom still echoed with voices. Cole's, loud and smug. "I don't care who she works for. I don't salute anybody who hides behind protocol." He thought the door was closed enough for her not to hear. He was wrong. She slipped the coin back into her pocket, eyes steady. The same calm that used to disarm threats overseas now turned on a man who didn't even realize how exposed he was. A young court officer passed by, whispering, "Ma'am, you okay?" Denise nodded. "Perfectly." But under her breath she added, "He just doesn't know where he is yet." The hallway lights flickered, footsteps echoing from the far end where news crews gathered. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Not rain yet, just warning. And inside that courtroom, a storm of a different kind was forming, built not from violence, but from the sound of a woman's patience running out in front of an entire nation that had just started paying attention. The clock above the bench ticked too loud. Every second sounded like a dare. The courtroom was back in session, but it didn't feel like justice. It felt like a storm pretending to behave. Captain Denise Walker stood again, calm on the outside, pulse steady only because training made it that way. Her voice carried through the room like measured thunder, low, clear, unstoppable. "As I stated before," she said, "the chain of command was respected. The evidence was handled correctly. That's not up for debate." Sergeant Cole Hartman leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes burning the way insecure men's eyes always do when they're losing ground. "Respect," he muttered. Funny word, coming from someone who forgot her place. The judge looked up, startled. The gallery stiffened. That one sentence rolled through the room like lightning that never found a place to strike. Denise didn't blink. She just said, "My place is wherever justice is missing, Sergeant. Guess that's why I keep finding you." A few reporters gasped. One of them whispered, "Did she just say?" and didn't finish. Hartman's grin flickered. Too much heat behind it now. He stood, ignoring the judge's warning again, voice louder. "You think you can walk in here and—" "Sergeant!" the judge barked. But the sound got swallowed by noise, murmurs, the shuffle of chairs. Camera shutters clicking like rain on glass. Even the security guards hesitated, unsure whether to step in or stay invisible. Denise didn't move. She didn't have to. Her stillness drew all the energy in the room toward her, like gravity switching sides. Every person watching could feel that she wasn't scared anymore. She was assessing, calculating. It wasn't defense, it was command. She spoke again, quiet but sharp. "You've disrespected this court, this uniform, and every person who believes in the badge you wear. But the thing about truth, Sergeant," she paused, eyes locking on his, "it doesn't need permission to make itself known." He opened his mouth to fire back, but nothing came out. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked unsure which mask to wear. The judge slammed the gavel, trying to catch control that had already moved to her side of the room. "Both of you, enough!" Denise nodded respectfully. "Of course, Your Honor." Then she turned slightly, shoulders squared, gaze still on the man who'd spent all morning trying to shrink her. She didn't say another word, but the message was there, heavy as steel. "You've already lost. You just don't know it yet." Reporters caught the look. Cameras flashed. The story that would circle the country had just taken shape. Not because of a punch, not because of a headline-ready spectacle, but because everyone saw a single moment where calm dignity crushed arrogance. The judge called for a short recess again, voice tight. The room emptied slower this time, people turning back over their shoulders, whispering. She didn't even raise her voice. In the hallway, Denise stepped into the sunlight spilling through the high windows. Her reflection shimmered on the marble floor, strong, composed, untouchable. She exhaled once, long and steady, like a soldier holstering emotion. Behind the closed doors, Hartman's lawyer leaned in close to his client. "You just gave her the case, Cole," he muttered. But the sergeant didn't answer. He just stared at the door she'd walked through, jaw tight, realizing too late that the silence he'd mocked had turned into the sound of his own undoing. The courthouse lobby buzzed with the low hum of news chatter and shoe soles on marble. Reporters had camped the steps since dawn, their cameras already hungry for a headline. But inside, the air was different now. It had weight. The kind that pressed down on people who realized they'd misread the balance of power. Captain Denise Walker walked back into the courtroom like she'd never left it. Same posture, same calm, same unshakable grace. Her uniform caught the overhead light and threw it back, almost glowing against the dull oak panels. She didn't look towards Sergeant Cole Hartman, but he felt it anyway. The kind of presence you can't look at without feeling small. The judge entered, robes sweeping behind him. "Court will reconvene," he said, voice cutting through the murmur. The gavel struck once. Conversation died. Cole sat stiff, chin forward, trying to wear confidence like armor. But you could see the cracks now. Shoulders too tight, breath too shallow. He'd spent the break arguing with his lawyer, words that ended with a whispered, "You're on your own." That phrase still echoed behind his eyes. Denise took the stand again, papers in hand. Not notes, proof. She set them down carefully, the soft thunk of folders louder than it should have been. Every lens in the room found her. "Captain Walker," the judge began. "You may proceed." She didn't rush. "Your Honor," she said. The incident in question occurred during a routine coordination meeting between local law enforcement and military police. My report is attached in detail. She tapped the folder. What's not written is the behavior that escalated this case. Cole scoffed, but nobody joined him this time. Denise turned her head slightly, eyes finding him, not angry, measured. "I've served in 3 deployments. I've stood in deserts, jungles, and alleyways. I've been called a lot of names, but never by people wearing the same badge as me. Until now." That sentence hit the gallery like a slow-motion wave. She continued, each word deliberate. "The badge for me means discipline. For him," she nodded toward Cole without saying his name, "it's decoration." The judge didn't interrupt. Neither did the defense. They couldn't. The silence was too heavy to move through. "I won't tell you what to think," she said, "but I'll remind you what the oath says. To protect and serve. Not to humiliate. Not to dominate. Not to decide who deserves respect based on who's wearing the uniform." The clerk stopped typing, realizing this was history disguised as testimony. Cole finally spoke, voice cracking on the first word. "She's twisting it. She's trying to make me out to be some villain." Denise didn't look away. "You did that yourself, Sergeant." He froze. The crowd inhaled as one. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to buzz quieter. The judge raised a brow. "Sergeant Hartman, one more outburst and you'll be removed." Cole leaned back, but the damage was done. His own anger had signed the confession he thought he'd hidden. Denise turned to the judge. "Permission to submit supplemental evidence?" "Granted." From her folder, she pulled a small USB drive, held delicately between 2 fingers. "This contains audio from the joint briefing 2 weeks prior, the same meeting referenced in Sergeant Hartman's report." The defense lawyer started to protest, but the judge gestured. "Play it." A bailiff plugged it into the courtroom system. The speakers hissed, then cleared. A man's voice came through, Hartman's, sarcastic, dismissive, layered with that smug authority that sounds polite until you hear what's underneath. "We don't need outside interference. Our guys can handle their own. The Army types can sit pretty and take credit later." Then another line, sharper. "I'm not taking orders from someone who doesn't even look like she belongs here." The room went still. Cole's lawyer sank into his chair. The color drained from Cole's face until his tan uniform looked darker than his skin. End quote. Denise didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her eyes stayed on the judge, expression unreadable, letting the silence do the work. The judge cleared his throat, slow and deliberate. "Sergeant Hartman, this recording, does it feature your voice?" Cole hesitated. It's taken out of context." The judge nodded once. "Context seems rather clear." Someone in the gallery whispered, "Oh my God." And the sound spread like a breeze through the crowd. Denise stepped down from the stand, each boot tap echoing through the chamber. She stalked beside the defense table, close enough for him to hear her voice without the microphone. "I didn't come here to embarrass you," she said quietly. "You did that all by yourself." Then she walked past him, straight to the exit line between the rows, her posture perfect, unhurried. The cameras flashed as she moved. Every shot would later frame her mid-stride, back straight, jaw set. An image that would replay on national news under headlines about integrity, service, and the cost of silence. The judge called for order, but order had already shifted. The case was still technically in session, yet everyone knew it was over. The system had just turned its gaze, and for once it wasn't at her. Outside, rain started to fall. It wasn't storm rain, not yet, just the kind that leaves tiny silver streaks down windows and uniforms. Denise paused beneath the overhang, the courthouse doors closing behind her. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. "Captain Walker, did you expect that evidence to leak? Do you plan to press charges? What message do you have for women of color in law enforcement?" She didn't answer any of them. She just looked past the cameras to the cloudy sky, exhaled, and said to no one in particular, "That's what accountability looks like." Then she stepped off the marble, into the drizzle, head high, boots tapping steady as thunder rolled in the distance. Inside, Hartman sat frozen. The courtroom lights hummed, the clerk kept typing, and the headline practically wrote itself. Courtroom silence, louder than any verdict. Morning broke gray over Washington, a thin mist crawling across the Potomac and settling on every windshield and headline box in the city. The news cycle had found its new heartbeat, and it thudded with her name. Captain Denise Walker exposes racist cop in open court. Accountability looks like this. By 7 a.m., every network had her face looping beside that single still frame. The moment she turned her back on the courtroom, calm and unshaken, while Hartman stared at the floor behind her. Commentators called it discipline under fire. Others called it the quiet revolution. Either way, the country couldn't look away. Denise sat in a rented sedan outside the Pentagon's east entrance, hands folded around a paper cup gone cold. Her phone hadn't stopped vibrating since sunrise. Texts from soldiers, friends, strangers she'd never met. Half were thank yous, half were warnings. She hadn't answered any of them. The radio inside the car was still tuned to a local station. A caller's voice crackled through static. "Not surprised. You give certain folks a badge, and they think they're untouchable until someone shows up who actually earned theirs." The host chuckled softly. "That clip's already at 3 million views." Click. Denise turned the dial off. The silence felt cleaner. Her commanding officer had told her to stay low until the official inquiry wrapped. But how do you stay low when the whole country's staring? The press camped outside her apartment? Online threads argued over every breath she took in that courtroom. Some tried to make her a symbol. Others tried to make her disappear behind noise. She finally stepped out of the car. The air smelled like wet stone and jet fuel from the base nearby. Reporters shouted questions from behind the security fence. Flashbulbs blinked like fireflies on caffeine. She didn't flinch, just straightened her jacket and kept walking toward the security checkpoint. Inside, the corridors buzzed. Not loud, but different. People moved with that half-whisper that follows history. A colonel she barely knew gave her a small nod as she passed. Two younger officers straightened when they saw her coming. No words, just quiet acknowledgement. The kind that means we saw what you did. Her phone buzzed again. A message from her mother in Alabama. Proud of you, baby. Don't let them rewrite what happened. She smiled, barely. In another part of the country, Cole Hartman was discovering what public accountability really felt like. Suspension papers, internal affairs, phone calls that started with, "We need to talk about optics." The man who once owned every room he walked into now couldn't step outside without someone filming him. For the first time, his silence wasn't power, it was proof. Back in D.C., a Pentagon spokesperson prepared for the afternoon briefing. Cameras already lined the press room, hungry for official soundbites. The statement was short. The Department of Defense stands by Captain Walker and reaffirms its commitment to integrity across all partnerships with civil law enforcement. No fireworks, just clean, institutional support. The kind that echoes louder than applause. Denise watched the broadcast from a quiet conference room, lights dimmed, coffee untouched. When the spokesperson said her name, she felt nothing triumphant, just the exhaustion of someone who'd carried a truth too long. Colonel Mason, her supervisor, leaned against the doorway. "You realize they're calling this the Walker Standard already," he said. She glanced up. "They can call it whatever they want. I just told the truth." "Truth shakes things," he replied. "Be ready for that." That night, the city glowed under low clouds, traffic lights stretching red across rain-slick pavement. Denise walked along the river with her hood up, thinking about the cost of silence and the weight of every camera that had turned her moment of restraint into a national mirror. Somewhere in those reflections were the faces of officers who'd texted her quietly, "You spoke for me." She wondered if Hartman heard those same words in reverse. At a diner across the river, a group of veterans watched her interview replay on a muted television. One of them lifted his mug. "That's how you fight without fighting," he said. The rest nodded. By midnight, hashtags had turned into petitions, and petitions into scheduled hearings on police-military cooperation. The machine of bureaucracy was slow, but for once, it was moving in the right direction. Denise didn't read the trending page. She sat at her kitchen table. Uniform jacket hung neatly on the chair beside her, hands wrapped around a steaming cup this time. The sound of the city outside was softer now. Tires on wet pavement, a siren far away, life going on. She whispered to the empty room, almost to herself. "Let them talk. I already said everything I needed to." And for the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe. Not like a headline, not like a symbol, just like a person who'd finally been heard. By the time the official inquiry convened, the courthouse had turned into a stage the whole country was watching. Metal detectors beeped nonstop, news vans clogged the block, and federal agents lined the walls like statues. Everyone had an angle. Journalists, activists, even politicians smelling opportunity in the tension. Captain Denise Walker arrived just after sunrise. She wasn't escorted. Didn't need to be. The uniform was enough. She stepped out of a black sedan into a swarm of microphones. Questions flew like insects, but she didn't swat them away. Just walked through them. Calm, composed, her silence louder than 1,000 statements. Inside, the inquiry room looked sterile. Too bright, too polished to ever hold truth comfortably. Rows of officials sat behind long tables, flags draped behind them, each face practiced into neutrality. And then, in the middle, Sergeant Cole Hartman, no badge now, no weapon, No swagger. Just a man sitting small under fluorescent light, the weight of his own choices pressing down on him. Denise took the witness chair. A murmur rolled through the room as cameras focused, red lights blinking in perfect rhythm with the nation's heartbeat. The lead investigator adjusted his glasses. "Captain Walker," he said, "thank you for coming. For the record, could you describe the events as you experienced them?" She nodded once. "Yes, sir." And then she did what soldiers do best. She told the truth like a report, not a performance. Step by step, fact by fact. No bitterness, no exaggeration, just clean, deliberate truth. While she spoke, Cole fidgeted, eyes darting between the panel and the floor. Each sentence from her lips felt like a mirror he didn't want to look into. At one point, the investigator asked, "Captain, did you ever feel unsafe?" She paused, looked directly at Cole, and said, "No, I felt disrespected. And that's worse, because disrespect is how danger starts." A hush fell over the room. Somewhere in the back row, a young recruit scribbled that line down like scripture. The questioning went on for hours. Protocols, communications, the infamous audio clip. But Denise never stumbled. She answered like a clock, precise, consistent, unshakable. When it ended, she stood to leave. The investigator spoke again. "Captain Walker, one last question," he said. "How did you stay composed during that courtroom incident?" She gave a small smile. "I've learned that calm scares bullies more than anger ever will." That line would replay on every channel before the day ended. When she stepped outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the world slick and shining. Sunlight broke through the clouds in long silver streaks that caught on camera lenses, lighting her like a movie scene she didn't ask to star in. Reporters shouted her name, but before she reached the car, someone else called out. Not a journalist, not a protester, just an older woman in plain clothes near the barricade. "Captain Walker," she said, voice trembling. "My son's in uniform too. Thank you for not letting them forget what that means." Denise smiled, genuine this time. "Tell him to keep serving with honor. The rest will follow." Back inside, the inquiry board deliberated. No one doubted the outcome anymore. The evidence had spoken, the cameras had carried it, and the public had decided. By sunset, the official statement hit every feed. Sergeant Cole Hartman found guilty of misconduct and abuse of authority, dismissed with prejudice. The same networks that once replayed his smirk now looped his silence. That night, Denise was invited to appear on national television. She declined. She didn't want to be a celebrity. She wanted to go home. But home didn't mean what it used to. When she finally reached her small apartment, the neighbors were waiting. Quiet, awkward, wanting to show respect without making a scene. Someone had taped the note to her door. "We stand with you." She smiled, unlocked the door, and stepped into peace for the first time in months. She dropped her cap on the counter, sat down, and just listened. No shouting, no questions, just the hum of the fridge and the soft creak of the floor under her boots. Then her phone buzzed again, an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but instinct made her answer. "Captain Walker," a voice said. Male, official, calm. "This is Director Simons, Internal Affairs Division. I wanted to say personally, you handled yourself with integrity today. You didn't just clear your name. You set a new standard." She didn't know what to say, so she said the truth. "I just did my job." "Exactly," he replied. "That's why it mattered." When the call ended, she set the phone down and looked out the window. The city lights flickered like distant fireflies, each one tiny but alive. Somewhere out there, other officers, men and women she'd never meet, were taking note. Maybe they'd remember her composure next time someone tested theirs. Across town, in a quiet motel on the edge of the city, Cole Hartman packed a single duffel bag. No cameras this time. No audience. He looked at his reflection in the dusty mirror and barely recognized himself. The man who'd mocked discipline had been undone by it. He muttered something to no one, then turned off the light. For Denise, sleep didn't come easy. Victory rarely does when it costs pieces of your peace. But when it finally came, it was deep. No nightmares, no noise, just silence. The good kind. Morning found her awake before sunrise, uniform pressed, boots clean. Habit, not pride. She brewed coffee, stood by the window, and watched the first commuters move through the mist. She didn't smile, didn't sigh, just stood there, grounded. The city was quieter now, but the conversation she'd started wasn't done. The reckoning had begun, and she could feel it, moving, not like anger, but like air clearing after a long storm. Months had passed, but the world hadn't quite let the story fade. Some headlines burn out in a day. This one turned into a lesson. They called it the Walker case in law schools, used it in training seminars, quoted her testimony in leadership talks. For once, the world had learned something without pretending it hadn't. Captain Denise Walker had gone back to work, quietly, without ceremony. No parades, no medals, just her desk, her files, and the sound of order returning in slow, steady rhythm. The office still whispered when she walked by, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was respect. That rare kind, earned not through shouting, but through surviving. Outside her window, DC looked the same, gray, busy, impatient. But her world inside had shifted. A stack of letters sat on her desk, some typed, some handwritten, all different voices saying the same thing. You reminded me what right looks like. One letter came from a young cadet in Missouri. They showed your video in our ethics class, it read. First time I felt proud to wear this badge again. Another from a retired general. Your composure under provocation is the kind of courage the Army teaches but rarely witnesses. Denise read them, one by one, carefully folding each back into its envelope like evidence of something beautiful. Proof that decency still traveled faster than hate. Her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number again. This time she answered without hesitation. Captain Walker? Yes. This is Senator Hughes. We're forming a civilian oversight council to review cross-agency conduct. Your insight would be invaluable. She smiled faintly. I'm not a politician, Senator. That's exactly why I called, he said. We've got plenty of those. She promised to think about it, knowing she probably would. Change didn't need speeches. It needed people who'd lived the imbalance. Later that afternoon, she visited the training center at Quantico. Rows of recruits stood at attention, a sea of crisp uniforms and nervous ambition. The instructor asked if she'd say a few words. She wasn't prepared, but she didn't need to be. Discipline isn't silence, she told them. It's knowing when not to give someone the satisfaction of seeing you break. The badge doesn't make you better than people. It means you chose to serve them. A recruit raised his hand. Ma'am, how do you handle disrespect? She looked out at the rows of young faces, some still naive, some already hardened. By remembering that the uniform means nothing if the person inside it forgets why they wear it. Applause filled the hall, but she didn't stay to soak it in. She slipped out the side door into the sunlight. The day was warm, the kind of light that felt earned. As she walked to her car, a familiar figure was waiting near the gate. Colonel Mason. He leaned against his vehicle, arms folded, the ghost of a grin under his mustache. "Thought I'd find you here," he said. "Checking on your legend?" she teased. He chuckled. "Just making sure you're not letting the noise get to you." She shrugged. "Noise never lasts. But what people remember, that's what matters." He nodded. "You know, that day in court, you didn't just defend yourself. You defended everyone who's ever been told to sit down when they should have stood tall." She didn't reply, but her eyes softened. Some compliments don't need acknowledgement. They just settle somewhere deep where pride can't twist them. They stood there a while, two soldiers under the same flag, watching recruits march in formation. The sound of boots on pavement carried across the courtyard, steady, unified, the rhythm of order done right. Later that evening, Denise drove through downtown as the city lights flickered on. Billboards flashed political ads, traffic crawled, pedestrians hurried across wet asphalt. Life unapologetically ordinary again. But she noticed something. A mural on the side of a federal building, painted overnight by some anonymous artist. It showed a black woman in uniform, standing tall before a wall of microphones. Below it, a single line in white letters: "Calm is not weakness." She pulled over, stepped out, and looked at it under the glow of a street lamp. No one else seemed to notice. Cars rushed by, indifferent. But she smiled, a small, private smile, and whispered, "Guess the message got through." Across town, in a quiet diner, two off-duty officers were talking over coffee. One pointed at the TV mounted above the counter, showing her interview replay. "That's the woman from the case," he said. The other nodded. "Yeah, she didn't yell, didn't swing, still ended his career. That's real control." They fell silent for a moment, both staring at their reflections in the window. Something about the story had shifted their definition of power. By midnight, the city had gone still. Denise stood by her window again, same view as months before, but her heart lighter. Outside, the rain started, gentle this time, tapping against the glass like applause too soft to hear. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the silver challenge coin she always carried. It had been with her through deployments, through loss, through that courtroom. She set it on the table beside her badge and whispered, "Still serving, just on a different front." The clock ticked quietly. The city lights shimmered through the drizzle. And somewhere out there, someone who had watched her story, someone who'd once thought silence was surrender, was learning what strength really looked like. Because sometimes justice doesn't shout. Sometimes it just stands its ground and lets the whole world see who actually deserves the uniform.